Well, hello. My name is Greg Hintermeister, and I'm really excited to talk about how to craft and measure a killer user experience. Now, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and along the way, I've learned some things that really help me, and I hope they really help you today. You can connect with me through email or via Twitter, or we can talk more and exchange ideas at my technical blog, hintervision.com. Today I want to go through 4 steps to craft this killer user experience. So the first one is define. There are a number of things to define to know what you're building, who you're building it for, and specifically what the user experience is like. And we'll go through a number of examples. Now the second step is to actually craft the user experience, and to do that you need to understand what a user experience is composed of, and you might be surprised at how deep the user experience really goes. The third step is to measure. We could say all day long that we've crafted this killer user experience, but until you've measured it, how do you know? Well, I've got a number of suggestions and examples on how to measure this user experience. And finally, we need to iterate. I don't know many products that are perfect the first time pencil hits paper. So I've got a number of examples and suggestions on how to iterate through basically the first 3 steps over and over again to make sure and to identify what is needed, what's missing, what's extra. So when you ship your product, you truly do have a killer user experience. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is define what your product is doing, and it's the mission. I recommend you have a mission statement for your life, but in this case, have a mission statement for your product. What is it trying to do, and who are you trying to build this for? My example that I've used is this: provide our target users a killer user experience, managing physical and virtual resources across compute, storage, and network, so business critical workloads can thrive. And now that mission statement can be used over and over again. It can help scope the project. It can help identify and keep everybody focused on what it really means to succeed. Because somewhere along the line, someone's going to come and say, you know what you need in your product is this, feature A. And you can very easily go to your mission statement and say, well, feature A help achieve this mission. If it does, great. If it doesn't, you need to decide, well, do we need to augment the mission, which probably isn't the case, or do we just need to not build that feature into the product? Now, the target user comment that I have, you really need to focus on who your users are. Now, you can go from a basic target user, a type of user, or you can go the other extreme and do detailed personas where you have a picture of them, you know their name, you know their personal goals, as well as what they need to do in their business. Either case, when you define your mission, you define your target users, you're creating focus. You're clarifying what your goals of the product are. As I said, you're clarifying the scope of what you want to deliver and what you should deliver. A really important piece of this is what you don't deliver to confuse and frustrate and make your product too much of a burden. The most important thing to me is it really helps unify the team. Get your designers, your lead developers, an executive or two, your marketing team, or if it's a small company and you just have 3 people in the whole company, define the mission together and define who your users are together. And with this unified approach, you're going to be able to work throughout the product's life and always go back to, hey, we're achieving our mission. Or, hey, this is a great feature. It really is essential to our mission. Let's add it. And it just helps along the way, even as you design the details of an individual page. Does this user need this kind of information? So now in my case, I used a certain word that I need to define. And in this case, I used killer. In the company I work for, it's not such a popular term, and people think, well, That's kind of violent. Look at the definition. Look at this. It's a thing that kills. And that's not the definition I want to use. I'm actually interested in the second one, a formidable or excellent person or thing. And look at that, a formidable or excellent person or thing. I want our products to be that. I want it to be formidable, excellent. And even diving in deeper, let's look at formidable. Well, the first one, inspiring fear. I don't want our products to be fearful, but I want our products to be inspiring and to inspiring respect through being powerful and capable. Now, with those two things, and that's why I use the word killer, with those two terms, it really encompasses what I want our users to say about our products. And I hope you do too, that all of these adjectives that we try to describe our product's user experience, sure, it can be beautiful and fluid and rock solid and reliable and trustworthy, relevant, and we'll go through a number of these terms. But in a word, I want our product to be a killer user experience where people are just excited about it and they think it's excellent and they respect it. It's competitive. I want it to be killer. So that's why I use it. You're welcome to use it, and you're welcome to use other terms as well. Totally up to you. Once we've defined what our mission is, who our users are, if you decide to use killer, you've defined that as well. You've defined the adjectives you want your product to take on. It's time to craft this user experience. Now, for me, to best communicate what user experience even is, I've broken it down into 6 themes. So the first one is presentation, and we're going to go through all of these in detail. The presentation is the first thing you see. It's the shiny objects. It's the shadowing, the colors, or if it's even a text-based product, the user experience involves the command line and the structure of the commands, the parameters, or the API. It's the presentation. It's the first thing users see when they look at the product. And most people think of this when they think user experience, and that's important, but it's really only the first of 6. Because the next one is navigation. How does your product help your users navigate to the resources and actions they want to perform? Now, whether it's a music app or a website or a product that manages many, many systems in a data center, you need a navigation that is just simple and elegant. And you know what? If they can't navigate to the systems or resources or actions that they want to run, that presentation wasn't really worth much now, was it? That's a little bit surprising. And the third one is relevant scenarios. Once they navigate to these actions, you want them to be relevant. I've got this analogy I use. I raise my boss's iPhone when I'm talking about this, and I say, this is really usable. It's a usable product, but you know what? It is useless for me. It is not relevant. It doesn't have my email, my calendar, my guitar apps. I need something that is relevant to me, and that's what's so important about having this killer user experience. If you don't have a relevant scenarios, well, you could have the prettiest presentation and the best navigation ever, and people still aren't going to like your product. They're not going to like the user experience. Now, the fourth theme is trustworthy feedback. You need to provide feedback at all levels so they can build trust about your product. Whether it's running a simple action and telling them, hey, it worked, it finished, or telling them, hey, something went wrong, and here's why, and here's how to fix it. They need to build trust with your software, and if they don't, even if you have the most relevant scenarios on earth for them personally, they're just not going to use your product. It's not a good user experience. Now, for a while, I stopped there and learned the hard way that the fifth theme of a killer user experience is the initial bring up. We need to focus on this initial touch point where they go from seeing your product on a website to seeing its initial presentation. So you need to really focus on it, and we'll go through all these and show examples and how to measure and everything. And it truly can be a barrier to even starting your product at all. And the sixth theme is connectivity. It has everything to do with RAS and security, being reliable, available, serviceable, all of the things that core quality products need. It's really the foundation for everything else that your product has. And I can't stress enough to focus on making sure your product's connectivity is rock solid, or else everything before it is questionable if it's worth doing. So you can think of each theme as a doorway that you guide the user through your user experience. So for example, as your users approach your first doorway, presentation, you want to craft it so they're attracted to walk through it. And it's just like any doorway. You want to adorn it with flowers and maybe some brick and a nice doorbell. And what you're doing is you're setting expectations so when they walk through, they are not only satisfied with what they have, but their expectations are exceeded. They're surprised at how awesome it is on the other side of that door. So each time you focus on the presentation, make sure that setting these expectations accurately. So when they walk through and they see the navigation, they go, wow, this is fantastic. So let's go through each theme in detail. The first one is presentation, and it has everything to do with the visual appeal. Now you could choose a text-based approach, a highly graphical approach like what I'm showing here, mobile or desktop, but regardless, it's the first thing users interact with. It's the layout of what they're dealing with, highlighting important data. You'll see on our hardware interfaces we have highlights of status, and we also show the important data. We do try to scrape out everything that isn't relevant, and sometimes we do that and sometimes it doesn't work. This is the key to a killer presentation, focusing on the visuals, the colors, the palettes, and also the data that's shown so they can see everything they really need to take that first step. Now this also includes down to the pixel detail. If you're going to bite off this visual appeal, you really need to focus on pixel level. So here's a couple examples we had is the status overlays on what exactly we're going to show. And also, as we let users tab around the hardware and have focus or click on a piece of hardware, we really want to make it obvious what they're doing. And so we want to make sure that down to the pixel is focused on. And so you see the presentation is a critical first piece. It's that first doorway that we want to make it elegant and pleasing so they can walk through it and start using the product in detail. Now once they walk through, they have the navigation. And the navigation is all about minimal clicks. It's intuitive. There's this scent of information. So every word, every icon gives them a hint about what's behind it. So for example, if I go in and hover over monitor, it gives me some clues that it's going to be some real-time content. And sure enough, I see active status. I can go click on active status and see a whole list of things. Or I could glance down the icons on the left and probably accurately understand that if I click on network, it's going to show me LAN connections, it's going to show me switches, and other things that I need to manage the network. So regardless of what your product does, your navigation is really the first time they interact with the product, and without a strong, simple navigation, that presentation just isn't worth it. I do consider search as a part of the navigation. Sometimes users will do search as a last resort, but other times they just go over and they're so used to Google World that they'll type in expecting elegant, fast search results. And we'll go into how to measure that, but that is a critical part of navigation to have that fluid search. Now, once they navigate to those tasks, you want them to be relevant. Every time they see an action they can run, you want to make sure it's simple, that there's less options. You want to make it obvious that they're clicking the right thing. And you want to use progressive disclosure. So I got some examples here. This initial view of creating a volume, there's really only two choices. You can click an icon, select these presets, or you can cancel. There's really no other choice, and it simplifies and it progressively discloses the details based on what they select. So in this case, they select thin mirror, and on the right, the dialog just opens up to ask another question. And it is a much simpler way to present these scenarios in a simple way. And once they have all the fields filled in, the action buttons are enabled, and they can create the volume. So you really have to ask yourself, what is the main thing you're trying to communicate? And you want to have them be successful. And we'll get into some of these measurements later on. And it really is telling that if you don't have these relevant scenarios, these relevant actions, boy, it's going to be disappointing. Their expectations as they walked through that navigation, they think, oh, this is great, I can get to that action so quickly, but it's not relevant, and what a disappointment it is. So make sure these are relevant, and there's a number of ways to test that out that we'll talk about later. So the next theme is trustworthy feedback. When they run these actions, when they see the resources, provide progress, provide real-time messaging. If you don't know what went wrong, be accurate and upfront and tell them, hey, this went wrong. We're not sure exactly what happened, but here's a number of ways to troubleshoot to see what exactly went wrong. And then, of course, in your next go-around, try to add detail to make sure you get the facts of what's wrong. Provide summary dashboards, a real-time status. In our product, what we've done is we've had a banner level, so at any time a problem occurs, they get a flash of an icon. The number increases. They can mouse over and see the detailed system that has an issue, or the job that has an issue. And it really helps build the trust that we know what's going on, we can help troubleshoot, and they can reliably run these actions and get feedback, and they, it's a cyclical process. They gain trust, they try it again, they gain more trust. And without this trust, you could have the most relevant actions in the world. Nobody will care because they can't trust it. So have that trustworthy feedback. And the next one is the initial bring up. And I talked about this, but it's important to have this runtime that's pretty, it navigates well, relevant actions, trustworthy feedback. But if they can't set it up, if it's not this welcome experience that details everything they need to do, they may not even get to try it. So be upfront. List the things that have to be done. So here's an example of what we've done to list what is needed by the user. Some of these are outside of our product, and we realize that. But your users have this tool, and it's just a part of what they need to do during the day. And so they really need to focus on getting the whole environment set up. So if your product can help them, they're going to trust it even more. Have pre-configured options, provide samples, make it faster and faster to get this into production. So the final one is reliable connectivity. And this has to do with providing access to the resources, security between the phone and the cloud, or whatever your product is doing, whatever protocols it's using. Is your product using agents to talk to different systems? Does it have a reliable connection? Is it fast? Does it have end-to-end performance that they're expecting? And does it integrate across the enterprise? Now, enterprise is kind of a geeky term, but whatever your product is doing, if your user has to connect your product to something else, make them aware that you know that as well. Help them make that connection. A simple example is when I'm on my phone and I take a picture, I want to email it to someone. Well, those are two different apps, but it doesn't mean that they aren't aware of each other. I can click the picture and say, please share this, and it opens the email app. And that is part of this killer user experience that I'm talking about. Is this connectivity is really the foundation of all of these themes. And without this reliable connectivity, everything else, maybe it's just not worth it. So make sure you invest in each one. And you might notice that the connectivity section really has nothing to do with UI. No fancy graphics, no nothing. Everything I'm showing here really relates to another theme, but this connectivity, the fast connection, the awareness that you're going elsewhere is really key. So now that we have these themes, there's kind of this surprising tension, and I've alluded to it a bit, but here it is in detail. The visual themes, the presentation, the navigation, a little bit, showing off what kind of actions you support. These are the doors that you want to make very nice. You want to have them walk through those doors. Your users are going to use the product based on what they see with these first couple themes. But the non-visual themes, the connectivity, the providing this trustworthy feedback, these are going to be what make the product worth it. And so historically, when people think of user experience and they think, oh, I need this wonderful layout, and maybe that's the first couple themes, the last four are really the core underpinning to this killer user experience that you want your users to have with your product. Based on that tension, you're gonna probably start wondering, well, I need to invest in all of it, but which one should I invest in? And there is that tension of, well, you need to invest in these visual themes, but you might need to do it more frequently. So, for example, if you have a product like what we do, and it's highly visual, and there's graphics, and there's very strong colors, every 12 to 18 months, you're probably going to have to make some changes and some updates. And I would propose that if you're doing a mobile app, it's even more frequent. Users' tastes change, the expectations change. You're just going to have to keep investing in those fairly frequently. Now, the middle themes, the scenarios, making sure they're relevant, still about every 2 to 3 years, you're going to have to keep updating of what relevant scenarios they really are. Businesses grow and change. The whole industry changes. At some point, you're going to have to leapfrog yourself, hopefully, to provide a new way of doing things. And every few years, you're going to have to do that, regardless of your investment. So keep an eye on this, on these areas, making sure you stay relevant in what your users have to do. Now, the last one, the connectivity, if you invest well and make it secure and reliable and rock solid and all those things, you could do it and it would last for 10 to 15 years. You could have a complete home makeover, and your presentation and navigation and the actions the relevant actions you run could completely change. But if you have this reliable connectivity, this trustworthy feedback, that is the foundation you want to build. So yes, you have to invest in all of these themes. It's really your business decision on how graphical, how visual you want to invest in. If your competition is, you have to. If your user expectations require it, well, then you have to do that. You have to step it up and make sure you invest every 18 months in improving that presentation and the navigation. So that's what I view as the half-life of how long your investment will last. Certainly, I'd like to talk more about it, what your experiences are, and so on, as we continue our journey together. So now let's get into measuring. Each doorway, you want to exceed their user expectations as they walk through it, and really you want to measure each theme because you want the results. This emotional response to have them trust your product, to be satisfied, to find it useful. And you can actually measure your user experience so you're pretty solid about what the results are going to be. So let's walk through that in detail. The first one is measuring presentation. As a refresher, it's the visual appeal, it's the layout, it's the visuals, it's highlighting the important data. This is really the only one that doesn't have a hard numeric metric, but there's certainly ways to measure it. Customer surveys is a big deal. It can be formal or informal. Just ask a bunch of questions, or when you bring customers in, stop them after they have their initial view of your product's presentation and just ask them, what do you think? Do you like it? Don't you like it? But another key piece is this visual designer approved over there on the right. You want to You want to make sure the people that are skilled in this visual practice approve it, can alter it as much as they need. So in practice, I like to use the grin metric, and that's kind of this corny thing, but when we bring customers in, it's very telling if your customers start using the product for the very first time. If they love it, if they think it's a killer user experience, they're going to instinctively smile, and that's just this great feedback that they can't really put into words. They love it, they know it, and they're going to struggle with how to describe it. But just look at your customer's body language. If they're crossing their arms and they're just not loving it, that gives you as much data as anything that you need to start thinking about how your product's presentation is working. One caution: are you giving accurate expectations? I guess I can't stress this enough. Users will trust your product more, even if there's some bumps and bruises along the way, if you're accurate in the expectations. If you say, you can trust this product like crazy, it's a little odd in the presentation, but once you get past it and learn it, you're gonna love it. And let's walk through that to prove it. This expectations check: are your demos accurately showing what they should expect? I can think of a couple products that I use regularly that do not have a great presentation, but I still love the user experience, because in one case, it looks like it was built in the mid-90s and not updated since, but I can post a product that I want to sell, or some used thing I want to sell, and boy, it's awesome. I get the feedback I want, I connect to who I want, and I sell it. So the next one is navigation, how to measure navigation. Now, this is where you are filled with numerical metrics, and I've got a number of them on the right, but in practice, I kind of boil it down to time before the first click. This scent of information. Is it obvious where to click first? The scent of information, Google it. It's not mine. It's a very common industry term, and there's been a bunch of research on it. Where are you using the words or the icons or a little phrase that will give them a hint about what's behind that click? And that's so important. You can measure that by just stopwatch. How long does it take before a user performs their first click? That also has to do with the noise and the distractions involved. Are there a million things they have to digest in order to understand where to go first? So then the next one is click count. And this can be overloaded. It's not the end-all be-all. But if you're navigating frequently to an action or to view something, you should really require less clicks. That's one reason why in our products, when you mouse over something, it will fly out, like I showed you earlier. It requires 0 clicks, and you can just see things and fly your mouse around and see all kinds of content, because it's a very frequent activity. So click count is important. It's not the end-all be-all, but it is important. Time between clicks, and this is that scent of information. Is it obvious once you click on something and see a whole new screen? Is it obvious where to go? But also the distance, and I'll talk about distance between clicks in a second. The fourth one is time to relevant search results. Search is an important piece of navigation, and users can get really frustrated. Sometimes they go to the search results because they're not anywhere else. I mean, they've tried other places and they can't find things, so they go to search. So they're already frustrated when they get there. Other times, it's they just open it up and, search. I love doing search. I'm going to go there the first time. So how many seconds does it take for them to succeed? Did they need to type in synonyms? Do they have to retype in order to get the search results? There's a number of measurable, numerical things. How many seconds? Did they have to retype things because our internal search database was not very intelligent? If they're looking for users, but they know it as profiles or IDs or roles, are you showing synonyms as well? Now, once they see results, what percentage of the relevant results are in the top 3 items? If what they click on is number 8 or number 10 or number 20, well, sure, they found it, but not only does that increase the number of seconds for them succeeding, but you can do some real work to bubble up those relevant results higher and higher. So those are just some in practice things on how to measure the navigation. Now, once you get this, the emotional response you're going to get is satisfaction and this sense of control. And that's in the lower right, these emotional responses. And that's really a key goal of, you can do all these measurements, but why? And the reason is you want them to be satisfied and to have this sense of real control with your product. And a big piece of that is through the navigation. Let's focus on this distance real quick. The particular example we had was in our mobile app. So on the right, you see our mobile app. You see the front tab bar item is selected. And we had to add a toggle. So we would overlay the real-time status of our systems and then show the LED states in another toggle. And initially, we had it way up at the top. So you see that arrow. And what we found is users generally like to use their phones with one hand. And so the thumb is a teller of, obviously it only goes so far. And in most phones, you can reach most areas with a thumb. But it takes some significant effort and some hand dexterity to go from the front tab bar, which is on the bottom, all the way up to the top icon area. So we ended up putting it right at the bottom where you see it now. And instead of a broad action, because it was done frequently, it's only a few pixels away. And they click the front, they can click the status and the LED status, or they click the rear and use the same toggle. And it's much more efficient, much less effort. And so we really helped users succeed, even in this small detail of where to place items, because we found that was the next thing they clicked. So have the things that they're probably going to click next close to the thing they clicked previously. And that's that distance. And you can actually measure that with a ruler. And that's how old school, but how fun. And so once this presentation is measured and the navigation is measured, and I've talked about this, you've set them up to have these relevant scenarios. And how do you know they're relevant? Well, in practice, I've kind of boiled it down to a few things. One is a survey. Ask them in person or when you go on site or through a conference call, what do you need to perform? How important is it? And how often do you need to perform it? Based on those, you can have your product have these top 5, and based on how often they do it, well, you need to make it faster and simpler because they're doing it over and over again. If it's very important but they rarely do it, well, you still need to make it very simple, but maybe you need to add more guidance because it's so important. You need to make sure they understand each step before they continue. Reduce the number of fields. It's simple. Count. You've got 18 fields on here. A new user, new to your product, has to read all 18 before they can really understand things. So use defaults, hide the advanced stuff, use the progressive disclosure I showed you before. So it only takes one step, and you're really focusing on this main thing. And here is an analogy. I in one of my other worlds, I compose music, and I took a film composing class by Ron Jones. And if you don't know him, if there's any trekkers out there, there's some awesome Next Generation episodes called The Best of Both Worlds. It was one that the Borg really was introduced and fought. And he composed those. So I love his work. And he has one main question at almost every time. And it really applies to user experience. And the question is, what's the main thing? What do you want your listeners to hear? Or in our case, what do you want our users to notice or to pay attention to? And that's a key question to ask every time when you're trying to reduce content or present an action. And that's what's so great about this progressive disclosure. Here's the main thing I want you to focus on. There's nothing else to choose from. Once you click it, great. We'll hide it, ask you the next set of questions we want you to focus on. And so what's the main thing? Ask yourself that over and over again. Now, success, you can measure success. We want novice users, not novice in your field. You want to have users come in that have never used your product before. And you want to measure, can those novice users complete this scenario within a target time? Identify the time that they think it would be okay to do it within. Weight it with frequency. If they do it all the time, they should be able to finish that task in 10 seconds, 20 seconds. If they only do it once a month or once a year, they maybe should take 5 or 10 minutes, but they should be able to complete it without assistance in that target time. And then finally, what are the steps required to complete this entire scenario? Now, in where we work, we use a process called complexity analysis. I've added the link down here. You can use it. You can read all through it. It's a really great process. It's quite detailed, so it's not for the faint of heart. But what it does is it says, here's your end-to-end scenario. There's probably 9 things you need to do to complete that scenario. First question, can you remove any of those steps? Just remove them. Then maybe you're down to 5. And of those 5, measure how complex each step is and reduce each one's complexity. Maybe there's one in particular that is just awful. The other ones are pretty great, but the other one's awful. It taints your whole product, that one step. So focus on it. So it's a great tool to use. I encourage you to at least go to that link, read up on it, and decide for yourself if it's worth doing. And now once you've done this, you've got these relevant actions, your users are going to feel accomplishment and pride and these emotions. Boy, if you want a dedicated user, a passionate user, and someone that tells others about your product, have a user that feels accomplished, that feels pride, and they feel valuable to the company because they're using your product, that they're useful, that they're useful because they're using your product. That's the kind of emotional response you want, and you can get that by measuring the relevance of the actions you provide. So the next step is to measure the feedback, and again, the feedback is the events, the progress, the messages, the troubleshooting, and in practice, I kind of broke it down to timely progress as they're navigating through the user experience. Are you showing feedback that, yep, you click this, within a second, I'm showing the next thing? If it's not within the second, well, that's today's world. People expect fast response. So figure out what your framework is doing wrong and fix it. Or minimally show progress within a second, even if you can't show all of the content. Show them that you understood and are responding to their request to go to the next view, and go on and on. Snappy performance is what I went through. Repeat waiting causes fatigue. You do not want your users to feel fatigue when they're using your product. You want peace of mind. You want to build trust. This is all about building trust in your product. Alerts. If your cloud that you're connecting to or a system you're managing that you're connecting to, show those alerts within 3 to 5 seconds. Don't try to hide that there's a problem. Show that, hey, I'm having some problems. Set the expectations accurately. And in the event you can't connect or there's a problem, show a list of things on how to troubleshoot. Make it relevant on how to fix it. Nothing loses trust faster than a message saying an unexpected error occurred. You might as well just write, please use our competitor's product because we don't know what we're doing. Don't trust us. And so I can't stress enough the importance of having this feedback. And you can measure it with a stopwatch. You can measure it by watching users. Trigger a problem. Watch users try to resolve it. Can they do it without assistance with your product and troubleshoot it successfully so they can move on and feel accomplished? So once you have that trustworthy feedback, you really want to focus and measure on the initial bring up. Now, truth is, a lot of times this is the last thing people think about. So you want to first measure time to evaluation. When your customers get your product, use demo data. I mean, how fun is it to open a mobile app and be able to use it instantly by using fake data? It helps them evaluate, is the product worth taking that next step? That's an important piece to this initial bring up. If they're excited about what they see, well, then their expectations and their goals, they might even sit through a 45-minute setup if they're excited enough because they've evaluated it using demo data. Time to production. How many steps does it take to get into production? What can be customized later? Identify these long tasks, simplify them, use complexity analysis that I talked about before. You want to go from this, yes, I want to use it in production, to I'm using it in production as fast as possible. Don't be the roadblock to that. And yes, use complexity analysis. What setup steps are too complex? Are you relying on a piece of information that is outside of your product? Well, if that is a barrier, regardless of if you think it should be outside your product, if it's a barrier to customers adopting your product, then you need to become aware of that piece of data, that cloud resource. All these things you have to be conscious of, and don't wait until the test phase to start thinking about this. Start from day one saying, yes, we want this elegant presentation, this fluid navigation, relevant actions. We want to build trust. And to do that, we need to have this awesome initial bring up, and here's how we're going to do it. You just list them out. So finally, you need to measure the connectivity. And this is, again, it builds trust, and it's one of these delightful, boy, it just works, and it's just great. Well, you can measure this in a variety of ways, and you can measure how quick it is to access something, how many times a connection is lost. By the way, the number should be 0. If it's not 0, figure out what you can do to reduce it. If you're doing mobile devices, certainly you might have a cellular connection that is outside of your control. But it doesn't mean you lose data. It doesn't mean you can't provide relevant actions while the connection is lost. You can provide offline capabilities. All of that builds trust, and being aware of measuring these uptime. How long is it going to be till I'm ready again? All of these things are important. And even if you don't have a fancy UI, if you're just a text-based application, all of this is still critical. Connectivity is essential to build trust. And when trust is built, you're going to be able to provide these relevant actions. When these relevant actions are there, you can then provide the navigation to get there. And if your customers demand a shiny interface with fancy artwork for your presentation, you can build that, and the whole package is there. They're going to say it's a killer user experience. They're going to love it. So that's how to measure each theme. And now when it comes down to it, the litmus test for me for a killer user experience goes like this. A lot of you have heard, and this is a very popular quote, that sales is the transfer of enthusiasm from one person to another. And that's true. When a lot of us are involved in communicating what our product does, in a way, we're in sales. And now me, I'm not in sales, but I provide technical demonstrations. And so my litmus test is to demo the product and transfer my enthusiasm. So that's what I want you to do. When you've got your product, show it off. Show off the presentation you've done. Show off the navigation that it provides. Perform your relevant scenarios. Show how they see relevance in what your product does. Reveal how easy it is to get your product productive. Take the time to install it in front of them, or provide a movie to do that. Show them how easy it is to test it out in their environment, or to test using demo data. And expose your product's trust by showing how we provide feedback, how the connectivity happens. Do the best demo you can. Then ask yourself, is the enthusiasm that I transferred during this demo and showed off the best, the highlight reel, is that enthusiasm going to be renewed every day as the user interacts with the product? That's the true test. If you focus on all 6 user experience themes, if you've gone through and measured it and say, yes, this is great, this is killer, well, then you can use this. The killer user experience is the continual renewal of enthusiasm. You can be assured that your customer is going to be, on day 1, they're going to be enthusiastic about using it. And on day 285 and on day 2000, they're still going to have that enthusiasm, say, I love this product. And when they have this enthusiasm, it's contagious. Whether it's colleagues or they write about it in a forum or on their own blog, or they decide to YouTube how to perform an action using your product. They're not even in it for the money. They're just excited to share it because they're so excited. It's actually given them an emotional reaction that they're happy, that they're delighted to use it, and it makes their life easier. They can go home in better spirits because of your product. That's a product with a purpose, and that's a true litmus test if they can continue that enthusiasm throughout the use and the life of that product. So once you've got this measurement and you've got all this data, what do? Well, you iterate. You want this constant real-time user feedback at all phases. You want to create these far-reaching designs. You want to provide this rigorous review and validation with everything I've shown. Then you want to create requirements to help improve it the next time around. So let's go into a little bit of detail on that. The first, constant real-time user feedback. I've talked about it before. You want to focus on novice users, not users that are just clueless about your field, but users that acknowledge that your product, that the field is needed, but they've never used your product. And even novices in compared to some of your experienced advanced users. We're seeing a shift as students in Africa and China and the US come out of college. They don't have the desire or the time to learn technology for technology's sake. They want to use it for a noble purpose. And the noble purpose might be to get their community out of poverty. But it's just a different kind of user now that's coming out that your products need to address. But certainly you can help your advanced users as well and provide the flexibility they require. So whether they're novice or advanced, I do want to make the point that flexibility does not mean complicated. You do not need to show 1,500 knobs to think that that's the flexibility they want. Provide a goal-based flexibility. What are their goals? What do they need to accomplish? And provide that in your user experience. And you do that by designing and iterating. Focus on what your users want, not necessarily what they say they want, because a lot of our users are focused on their current processes, and rightfully so. They're gauged upon the success of those processes. But what if you could provide a new way of doing things that is well above and beyond what they were thinking? So listen to them, hear what they're saying, but also think about what they really want, not necessarily the exact words that they're saying. Craft your user experience using the 6 themes I went through. Measure the user experience as it unfolds, and go through it repeatedly through the design iteration with feedback, and then start coding. I love the Agile process. It's great. It provides great feedback, but make sure the Agile process happens within the design phase before any coding, because it's just so much cheaper. You can change the design 15 times a day, literally, and get it better and better and better each time. But if you wait until it's coded, you could do it 15 times a week, maybe, if you're lucky, 15 times a month, but it's more expensive. So do that initial design up front and iterate up front. Provide the rigorous review and validation, and this is all this circle, this continuous circle. Get users involved from day one. Get external customers. Get someone that you say, this will be a great consumer of our product before the product even exists, and get them involved in day one. Become your user advocate. Run your product as your customer would yourself. Get your technical leader to have an acceptance test to say, I want to run this as the user would. If there's any hiccups, we want to catch it. And have your expert peers that are also fluent in this design model review the details, because they're going to pinpoint some things that are very minute but could cause a much more fluid experience. Now, once you have all that, you design and you design and you design, and then you code it and you test it. At some point, you're going to ship it. Once the product's out there, continue that feedback and validation and create the requirements that will improve based on that feedback. And so each theme, focus on what can I improve in each theme. Can I improve the connectivity? Is it time? Is it my 18 months up? Do I need to continue my improvement of the presentation? Focus on what themes you want to improve on. Provide requirements that will help improve it. And even run through initial measurements that will say, we think our connectivity will improve by 2x by doing such and such. And then we can really we can start funding these enhancements, based on the user experience. And that's what we want to have happen, is having the investment improve the user experience at all phases. So finally, when kind of boiling down to it, you want to listen and then speak. And so what do I mean by listen? I want to review through customer visits, user testing, internal evaluations, listen for the hiccups. Whether it's the customer testing it or whether it's me running through it or the test team or whoever it is, I want to catch the issues early on, even as I define the mission statement that we talked about at the very beginning. What's the mission of our product? Who are our target users? Listen to the team that's involved. If we can develop it together, get the best of everybody's experience, it's just going to be a killer user experience. Listen for those hiccups. Listen to this irritating, what makes you numb? It's the repeated little bumps in the road. Goes, we'll have to add help to describe that thing. If you find yourself saying that, or your colleague, boy, draw a big circle around that and fix it. What are the assumptions? Listen to the assumptions that you make, that your users make. A lot of times we'll have users come in and say, yeah, I usually do such and such, but that's kind of unique. I'm sure that's not real world, so I understand that your product does this, so I'll assume that and go and move on. Don't assume it. Make sure that users can accomplish what they need with no assistance, and don't make assumptions. And listen to how your customers work. Your product should work in harmony with other tools that they're using. What additional integration or even awareness can your product add? If you have events or status of a certain resource, can you export it? Can they export it? Can they share with their bosses what's going on to prove that your product is worth it? Can they integrate your data with someone else's data? It's really a realization and an awareness that your product is just a small piece of what your user's life is all about. Then speak about it. Once you have all this data, propose solutions to fix it. Now, if we're in the early design stages, and you're responsible for the design, that's easy. You just erase the pencil marks and draw something else. But if you're deep into production and you're about to ship it, sometimes you need to rank the projected impact these issues are going to have on your users. And so here's just something that I did some research and brought some people together and created this potential impact. But it helps us prioritize. Is it a low? Is it an annoying little paper cut? This little irritant. But if you have a lot of them, that could dramatically decrease the user experience. Or if you have a few medium ones, they're annoying, they might call service, they might complain on a forum. Well, that starts impacting your word of mouth, and that's not good. And as it moves up high, is it really going to diminish the quality or the usefulness of your product up to critical? Is it a barrier to them even purchasing it or using it? Rank what you find and label it with one of these priorities, and then label how much you think it would cost to fix, so you can make an honest decision and about what can we do now. And even when we ship it with some of these, this gets back to our expectation. We need to make sure our expectations are accurate. When we show the demo, show this limitation. Say, hey, this first release, we're going to focus on this. We know we don't do this. Let us know if you think it's worthwhile. But if you like this piece, you're going to love this product. And here's how we've moved through each of these user experience themes and so on. Be upfront. Speak about what's wrong. Speak about how you want to fix it. Ask customers the priority and how much impact it's going to be on their adopting that product. Thank you. What I hope you learn now is that you can define your mission statement, define who your users are, and hopefully you now have a definition of what user experience even is. We've gone through how to craft the user experience through the presentation, the navigation, going through relevant scenarios, providing trustworthy feedback, providing this great initial bring up, this rock solid connectivity, and all of it put together composes the whole user experience, and it's far more than flashy objects and shiny artwork. And then we went through measuring that user experience. How many times faster does yours do it compared to what it used to do, what customers had to do? Are we reducing the effort required? Are we making it, the distance from one click to another, the number of clicks, the frequency, the time to success? Measure all of that and compare to what they had to do before. Compare it with what they're doing now and show the value based on the product on your own. And then iterate through. Design it, get feedback, design it some more, refine it, get customers involved from day one. So I hope you enjoyed how to craft and measure a killer user experience. I hope you use the word killer or another adjective, but choose something that really reflects your goal and what your product really should be. And finally, again, I'd love to continue this conversation, whether it's through email, through Twitter, or go to my technical blog, pintervision.com, and we can talk about all aspects of user experience and even how we can continue to improve and grow this community. So thank you for your attention, and good luck.